This episode of the Topcast is proudly supported by My Music Staff. Hello teachers, it's Tim Topham here and welcome back to another episode of the Topcast. I'm delighted that you'll be spending a little bit of time with me today. And in fact, it is just with me. And it's a solo show, and the title's a little bit odd. I imagine you probably looked at that and went, that's a bit weird. When your role as a teacher is threatened. The genesis of this episode came about through a number of conversations I've been having with members in some one-on-one meetings and coaching and things like that. And it comes about when you as a teacher take a more flexible approach to your students' learning and give them more autonomy and options and choice. Because one thing that can happen is that you can start to feel a little bit like you're not sure what your role actually should be because the students are so self-driven. So in today's episode, we're going to answer that question and give you some things to think about and some clarification about what it means to be a really flexible teacher that gives students more autonomy. We know that autonomy is really important to identification and self-actualization and intrinsic motivation and all sorts of things. So it's really important, but it does slightly shift oftentimes your role and your perception as your place as a teacher. So that's what we're unpacking today, and let's get into it. Okay, so this episode has come about after some conversations I've been having with our members, and it's all about that tricky situation that many of us find ourselves in when we're really open and flexible and want to help our students learn what they want to learn, and particularly when they're teenagers and adults. That situation we get into where we find that students only want to teach themselves things on YouTube or learn by rote or play by ear. And they don't really want to learn to read or take an exam. And the question then becomes, what is our role as a teacher? Because in my experience anyway, what happens is these students come back each week and they've made progress, but we aren't really sure what to do and how to help them because their teaching and their needs don't fall into our standard categories of we need to teach you how to read or sight read or play rhythms or whatever it is. When students don't fit into this box, what do we actually do? Because it almost feels like our role as a teacher has been a little bit threatened. It's like, am I a good teacher? Am I doing the right things? Should I be forcing them to do something else? What do I do? Or am I just babysitting? Should I be taking their money? All these questions roll around in our heads, and I totally get there. I've been there many times, and this will be the kind of feeling that any teacher out there who has taken that step of moving to a really open and flexible approach to working with students where you do allow them to take some ownership of the direction of their lessons. So the simple new way of looking at this, and this is what I've been mentioning as I've had these conversations with our members, is that you need to change your thinking a little bit about the role of a teacher. Your role as a teacher for these students, and to some extent I would say for all your students, is to move to more of a guide or a mentor. It's more about sitting beside your student and leading them along their own journey, rather than directing them or sort of from the behind saying, this is what you need to do, or dragging them along or dictating from on high. Rather than that approach, and I'm sure none of the people listening, of course, are like that, but instead of that approach, it's moving to more to this coach or guide or mentor role. And so what that really means for students who are really focused on doing things that aren't necessarily part of our regular sort of toolkit of teaching, that we work out what we can add to these students' experience. And what that tends to be is using your depth of knowledge, your experience, your both life experience and your musical experience, the wealth of music that you've been exposed to over your years, and help guide them with things that will improve what they're doing. So I would always suggest, how can they add dynamics? A lot of kids who are learning things themselves or playing by ear and that sort of thing don't really have a sense of beginnings and ends and movements through phrases where things are shaped and dynamics change. So there may be other ways that they could play whatever it is that they're learning. Maybe using the pedal differently. Maybe they're using too much pedal or not enough pedal. So you could give them performance suggestions. How would you perform this on stage? Maybe they're really comfortable playing it and jamming, but if they were actually put into a performance situation, it would be quite different. Maybe you could suggest that they record what they're doing and start building up a YouTube channel or audio recording or podcast about it, whatever that is. There are lots of different ways you can suggest expanding on what they're already doing. The other area where you probably have a lot of skills is repertoire. You probably have quite a broad repertoire base. So could you encourage them that if they like this style of music, that maybe they would be interested in this particular piece or this classical version, which sounds really like this piece, or those kinds of things. So making connections to other music, broadening your students' the sound palette of what they're listening to, and giving them more experience from a performance perspective. So they're the kind of things that I would naturally do. And I don't want you to feel bad if you end up in this position, because it actually shows that you're doing a great job, because we know that autonomy is really important for student success. In fact, I was watching Professor Gary McPherson. He is an Australian professor here at our Conservatorium of Music in Melbourne, and he was a keynote speaker at the recent NCKP online conference. And he was talking right at the start of his presentation about self-determination theory, which aligns beautifully with this comment that I made about autonomy. And self-determination theory says people are motivated to grow and change by 3 innate and universal psychological needs. And this theory suggests that people are able to become self-determined, i.e. self-motivated, and this is what we want for our students, right? They can become self-motivated when their needs for competence, connection and relevance, and autonomy are fulfilled. Competence, connection or relevance, and that's why I'm always talking about how we can find connections between the music students learning and older music and newer music, and what they've learned in the past and what they're learning in the future, and making connections, so important. And the last one is autonomy. So giving students autonomy within the bounds of your teaching approach is super, super important. And even for young children, where we tend to give them less autonomy because, well, we kind of drive things more, I guess, for primary or elementary school students. But even for young children, that might just be, would you like to learn this piece or that piece? So simple options like that, just like you might do with a child who's in your family. Or more open, sort of, what's a piece you've heard on piano that you would like to play? Or what's something that your dad or mum's played or that your friends play that you would really like to play? We can give our students some sense of autonomy right from the beginning. But for teens and adults, we really must be guided by the goals and aspirations for that student. If we just take on a new transfer student or a new teen beginner and we just say, right, this is what we're doing, it's Alfred or Bastian or whatever, our adult method, bang, we're just going to start reading, they'll drop off so quickly. All right. When they're teenagers and adults, we really need to meet them where they're at and find out what are their goals, where are they going. Do you know why your teen or adult student is learning? Have you asked them? Well, I hope so. And what is that? Where are we taking them? How are we going to get there? It's really important to align that approach with their goals if they're going to stick with you. I remember having a conversation with the late and wonderful Forrest Kinney. I was very lucky to interview him a number of times. And on one interview, he was talking about a student. I was asking him, is it okay if students only ever play one composer's works for ages or never learn to read properly or whatever it is? And he told me a story about a student who was, I think it was a late teenager, and he only wanted to play the Beatles and nothing else. And he went on teaching this student the Beatles for about a year. And that was all he wanted to learn. And Forrest didn't push any other styles of music or any other approaches to learning. He just went with it and helped that student as long as far as they could go with that. But then an interesting thing happened, and that's that after that year, the students started to ask questions about other types of music or other styles. I can't remember exactly what it was, but maybe it was a piece of classical music or a different composer, or wanting to learn more about how the music was composed rather than just playing it. And so that journey that Forrest went on with that student, number one, it kept the student playing and engaged and learning. If Forrest had gone, right, we're not doing Beatles anymore, we're just going to do something else, we risk that the student will quit and never come back. So he went with it, went with the student's direction, and then eventually the student decided of their own accord, oh, maybe we could try doing something else. I had that same experience. Many of you will have heard some stories that I've told about a student that I took on who had been learning with other teachers and was really ready to quit and just was completely over it. And I was the last chance, really, that her mum had to get her daughter to continue playing. And so I asked her, what are your top 10 songs that you're listening to on the radio, and decided that we could work on some of those. And we did. We chose a piece, and she absolutely loved it. And I taught her the chords, and I showed her how music worked. And we went on and did some more pop music. And anyway, after a few months, she actually said to me, Tim, can we play some classical music? I'd really like to play some classics. I'm like, yes. In my head, I'm like, yes, win. So just the very act of working with a student and working and allowing them the autonomy to choose their direction, working with them on that, what they wanted to do, ended up bringing both these two students, Forrest and my own, back into classical music and reading and hopefully, fingers crossed, a lifetime of loving and enjoying and playing music, when the opposite could well have happened, and that is that we forced them down a route they didn't want to take and they end up quitting. So on autonomy too, it needs to be within the bounds of your teaching approach and what is good for them. It's a little bit like as parents, we're the best to guide our children's eating because they may not realise that eating junk food every day will have a negative outcome. I think in the back of their minds they probably do, but they're not old enough to kind of make that decision for themselves. So we have to guide them. And we know that as teachers, balance and a holistic approach in our teaching is key. So going back to that original question, what can you do with that student that seems really fixated on one thing and you're feeling a bit insecure about your role and you're not sure what to do? Well, some other ideas are to find out what your students' dream pieces are. What would they really like to play? And I'm not talking, dream piece of video game music because that's all they're playing, or dream music of Beatles because that's what they're already doing. But generally speaking, what's a piece they would really love to play? And if they don't know any of them, then show them some amazing but reachable possible music, even if it's a fair leap. I'm thinking about things like Moonlight Sonata or the Chopin Fantasy Impromptu. Some of those well-known show-offy pieces, and you could demonstrate them if you're comfortable doing that, even if you can just play a bit of it, really. And if you're not comfortable with that, then find some videos on YouTube. In fact, just as I was preparing this podcast, I watched Daniel Trifonov playing the Fantasy Impromptu on YouTube. I just searched for Fantasy Impromptu. I think he might have been the top link, actually. And the clip is really well produced, and it looks like it could be the start of a James Bond film. Check it out. We'll put a link in our show notes to it. It's the kind of thing that could really inspire students to go, wow, this piano thing, if I could get really good, this is really amazing. This is fun. It's the kind of thing that really inspired me to get back into higher level classical playing some 10, 15 years ago, was I saw Christian Zimmerman perform some of the Chopin Scherzi. They're super old videos, but he just, playing them using, the full tails and the grand piano, and he just made it look so effortless, and I just love the music, and that really got me back into playing at a high level and really striving to achieve that high level. So the same thing can happen for students. You just have to find the right trigger, the right catalyst, I think. Private music teachers and studio owners agree. My Music Staff is the #1 studio management software. Designed specifically for music teachers, you can manage your student list, organise your schedule, track attendance, collect payments and more, all in one place. Visit mymusicstaff.com to sign up for a free trial. My music staff. Teach more, stress less. Now, another question that you may be thinking in the back of your mind is, if my student is just teaching themselves on YouTube or they're just learning to play things by ear, shouldn't they be learning to read? And my thinking is no, not necessarily. Or at least not right away, and certainly not as a forced outcome for music education. And I also always think of bands like the Beatles. Without question, the Beatles have been one of the most influential, popular, and recognizable music groups in modern history. And according to every research that I've seen, not one of them could read or write music. And I found a little 1980s interview with a magazine. John Lennon said, "None of us could read music and none of us can write it." So, in my opinion, it's okay if students aren't reading music, at least initially. Particularly if they're a teen or adult student and they're new to your studio, then this could be okay for some time. Now, of course, if you're taking on younger students, then reading should be part of any holistic teaching approach, and you would do that soon after beginning. I, of course, start with a no-book approach, really fun, creative activities for a good, anything from 5 to 10 weeks of those first lessons. I don't think should be include any reading at all, because you can just have so much fun and achieve so much with students in that time. If you're interested to find out more about that and you're not familiar with my no-book approach, then you can just head to topmusic.co/beginners and you'll get a great overview of my first lessons. I actually show you exactly how I teach, and you can download the lesson plans. So reading should be a part of any holistic teaching approach. We would all agree with that. And it's ideal to have students learning to read because it opens up so many opportunities. But I guess what I'm saying is if they're older, then don't force it. It just won't work unless they're committed and passionate and actually want to do it. So how can you sort of guide a student to want to get inspired to learn to read? Well, just as performing or showing amazing performances of incredible music that the students could play in the future or might like to, one other thing I've done to demonstrate the power of reading ability is to demonstrate superpower sight reading. So I'll just grab some music and play it in front of the student. I'll even hand them a pop song book and say, choose a piece, and I'll play it. I don't even know what you've chosen, just to prove that I haven't planned this in advance. But you could do the same thing, have a look through something quickly beforehand if you're a little bit shaky with your sight reading, but just to prove to them the flexibility that comes with an ability to sight read. Sometimes that will definitely convince them. And it's what happened to me with one of my teenage students actually some years ago. He was a play-by-ear kid. He used to put the music up in front of him, but he never looked at it. I'm sure we've got kids like that as well. So he was a memorizer and a play-by-ear ariser. And he was kind of on the borderline of wanting to read. He could see the value, but it wasn't until I demonstrated sight reading in front of him that he actually then went, "Oh yeah, okay, this I think I'm ready to do this." And so I told him about the process. I said, "You know what? This is going to be a little bit miserable for a while. We're going to be going back. We're going to be doing very basic things. You're going to be playing hot cross buns. You're going to be looking at the music, and we're going to be doing some pretty beginner method books and things like that." And he said, "Yeah, okay, get it." And I said, crucially, I think, "I'm not going to get you to perform in front of your school or at a recital playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. Don't worry about that. This is between you and me. We're just going to work on it, work really hard in our lessons." Anyway, this student, he did it. He persevered and he learned to read as a teenager who was really a predominantly play-by-ear student. And he managed to do it. But he had to be committed to it and he had to want to do it. So it is possible. Don't give up. And if your student does go down the reading path, make it as exciting as you can. I think of things like Piano Maestro, which I love to gamify, using backing tracks, whatever you can do to make that as exciting as possible, particularly for a teenager who doesn't, particularly if they don't really want to do it, or if they are okay to, they're up for doing it, which is my preference. But, you want to keep it moving along. So, yeah, see how you can use technology. So that was Piano Maestro. I really love for that. All right, so let's just get back to that student that is making you feel a little bit threatened in your ability to be a good teacher or making you feel a bit insecure about your role. Some more ideas would be to have a bank of music that sounds like another artist. So if they like pop songs that are slow and sad and arpeggiated, then they might like a simplified version of Moonlight Sonata. You could play it and they might go, wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. I really love that. So having that kind of sounds like collection can be really, really useful. And I've been thinking recently about how we might be able to put together a bit of a blog or a feature inside our Repertoire Detective, which is a part of our Top Music Pro membership, to make some of these connections for students. So I'm going to have a bit of a think about that. Let me know if that would be something that would be useful for you. If they like the sound of some video game, then maybe they'll like a Chopin prelude. I don't know, whatever it is. If they like fast and loud, then maybe a fireworksy, show-offy piece could be really, really good. And another resource that I've actually designed to help you, particularly with teen and adult transfer students, is what I call my transfer student diagnostic. Have you ever wondered, if there's a good process for assessing a transfer student's competency and also working out what their goals are? Well, I've actually created this for you. It's part of a course that we have in Top Music Pro all about teaching teenagers and transfer students. And what it does is takes you through my process of when you get a transfer student, and I've had lots of transfer students. They're actually my favorite kind of students. If anyone else has transfer students as their favorite students, because a lot of people, it's like, no, please no, I don't want to be fixing all these problems. If anyone else likes transfer students, let me know. I'd love to connect with you. But it goes through what I do in that first lesson. So most importantly, I watch them and listen to them play something. And I've got a checklist here that you're looking at things on the score and how they're playing. Are all the note names written in the score? Anything unusual there? Are they actually looking at their score? Are they maintaining a steady pulse? You can learn lots and lots about this. And then you can ask them some stuff about the music. Do they know what the key is? Do they know the value of rest? Can they count? Things like that. So we go through a full checklist there for either one or two pieces, depending on how many they're going to be playing, even three, if they're a well-prepared student. Sometimes you'll get a transfer student and they can barely play anything at all. But what we can then do is assess them, give them some assessment, see if they can read, see what their tapping's like, can they chant something back to you? All of these kind of things are really important in that first session with a transfer student in order to work out where they're actually up to and where they're at. So this is part of what we've called the Teen Teaching Toolkit course. It's inside Top Music Pro membership. And it's all about teaching teenage and adult both beginners and transfer students. And I have first lesson plans for transfer students and beginners in both teenage categories. And this also aligns really well with adults. We've got goal setting ideas. We've got a one-page goal tracker. We've got interview questions. So if you're taking on a teenage beginner or adult beginner, what questions should you ask you at that? Should you be asking at that first interview or first lesson? The same for transfer students, and that's different to the diagnostic, by the way. Just interviewing and answering and chatting to parents and things is so important. You can also get my teen troubleshooting guide. This is an absolute win. Think of it like a first aid kit for transfer and teenage students. Really, really useful. And you get my Teen Teaching Toolkit ebook. So if you're interested in any of these downloads, then you head over to topmusic.co/courses and look for the Teen and Transfer Student Toolkit course there for more details on exactly what you get and how you can access it inside Top Music Pro membership. So that's it for today's episode. I want to wrap things up and just say, if you are feeling a little bit insecure, unsure about your role as a teacher, wondering why the student's still coming and you're getting paid when you don't seem to feel like you're doing anything, I just want you to rest assured that it's okay. And it's probably because you are doing some of the right things, i.e. giving them some autonomy, allowing them to choose their path, to set their goals. It's just a matter of redefining your role in their life as their teacher / guide / mentor / coach, reassessing where that role fits and how you can help guide and mold them, even though you aren't necessarily teaching, reading, festivals, exam syllabus, whatever it is that you might feel more comfortable doing. Yes, you'll feel a little bit uncomfortable, and sometimes that status of feeling a bit uncomfortable as a teacher can be really fulfilling for you as a teacher, because it will push you to think, to try new things, to approach things differently. And I always do say too, if you're truly concerned that what you're doing is of no value at all, and I would very much doubt it, even sometimes the mere connection that you have with a student and that 30, 45 minutes, an hour a week that you have with them can be worth the investment from the parent. But if you truly don't think that you're having any impact, or the student isn't making any progress that they couldn't do on their own, then I would just say have a chat to, if it's a child or a teenager, then have a chat to their parents about it and see where they're at. And they may very well be in the mindset of, you know what, he or she just absolutely loves coming and spending time with you and talking about music. Even if you're talking for 20 minutes about cool music, or listening to it, or watching YouTube, they enjoy it, they value that time, and maybe that's as important as teaching them reading or helping them pass an exam. So, wrapping things up, did that help answer some of your questions? Did it alleviate some of your fears? Or has it given you more things to think about? Or has it made you worry more about what your role is looking like in the future? Well, of course, we're here to help you, as always, over in our Top Music Pro membership if you're not already a member. And if you do have any questions or comments, or you've been in the same situation, or you haven't been, or anything at all to do with today's episode, then do head over to our show notes page, topmusic.co/episode 264. Feel free to leave a comment there that I'll be delighted to respond to, or over on any of our social media channels. Just mention this episode and we'll be sure to connect with you there. Next week on the podcast, we have a returning guest. She's been on a few episodes actually with us. It's my great friend and the wonderful teacher, presenter, author, extraordinary human, Leela Viss, joining us on the show next week. I can't wait to catch up with her and share all that she's been doing, some of the hard things, some of the good things. We'll get to catch up with Leela next week. Until then, I'm Tim Topham and this is the Topcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to speak to you again next week. For more information about this episode and to find out how to enhance your own teaching, visit topmusic.co. You'll find everything you need for your studio, from lesson plans to cheat sheets, quick win teaching ideas, and guides on how to build your teaching business. Plus, you'll be connected to a global community of the world's top music teachers. And when you're ready, join hundreds of other teachers around the world by becoming a Top Music Pro member and get access to all our bonus content and flagship courses. And don't forget to follow topmusic.co on social media and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. That's all for today. We'll see you in the studio.